everyone, so I'm going to be doing a reading on the Dalai Lama's chart. He's obviously a very interesting man. He's got a very interesting chart as well. He's been through a lot. So also I'm going to be making these videos just a little bit shorter as well, just make them a little bit more precise and accessible. So just focusing on the main aspects and the signs. So he's got a Cancer rising. Cancer risings can kind of come across as someone who's very familiar, almost like a family member, very comfortable, consoling, calming, nurturing, very trustworthy, and maybe that's sort of why people feel quite comfortable around him, because this is the energy that he projects. This is his Cancer rising. It's how he sort of presents himself to the world. I actually find it also really interesting to note that the Dalai Lama actually translates to ocean of wisdom, and the moon ruling all sort of bodies of water, including the ocean, and also Cancer being a water sign as well. I find that quite interesting. Cancers can also sort of be quite private and sensitive, very sort of sentimental and supportive as well. The Cancer archetype I think is very important when talking about the Dalai Lama, because, you know, it's also his sun sign, and his sun is also conjunct his ascendant in Cancer. So I'll talk about his sun sign a little bit later on. So the moon can also represent the public, the collective, so also maybe why he can connect emotionally and also, you know, quite well to large groups of people and an audience. Because Cancer is so familiar, maybe it feels kind of like he was just sort of sitting in his living room talking to his family kind of thing. He looks very comfortable talking to groups of people. The moon is also our instincts as well, so how we're brought up. And he talks a lot about the nature of our instincts and where they come from, and, you know, sort of our behaviours and thoughts. Sort of understand sort of where we come from and why we do and say things, and just sort of bringing those sort of things to light a little bit more so we can be a little bit more conscious. Also looking at, you know, our roots and our upbringing is very Cancerian. He also sort of teaches a lot of compassion and forgiveness and tolerance, which are all sort of, you know, the highest forms of the Cancerian archetype. A negative form of Cancer being maybe sort of to cling or to hold on to the past in a negative way, or sort of hold a grudge. Cancer is also really good at reflecting, so it's a water sign, just like the image obviously of water, to reflect on things like the past or our behaviour, or just about life in general, which I feel he does a lot of, obviously, to reflect our own behaviours and attitudes back to us so we can reflect on that and understand, and also to learn. Cancer risings can also sort of have quite round faces. You can, if you picture the moon, also sort of deep and emotional looking eyes, almost like they're about to cry all the time, almost, but they're not, obviously. Quite emotional and caring, just as how they come across. So his ascendant ruler is the moon, and the moon is in Virgo, which is sextiling the ascendant in Cancer. This is sort of just helping this image of coming across very helpful and nurturing and parental. Virgos also can be represented by the Virgin Mary, Mother Mary, so it's also a very nurturing sign. So the sun conjunct the ascendant. This is always a very prominent position for the sun on any of the angles, especially the midheaven or the ascendant. So it's not really a surprise that he's in the public eye. Many sort of public speakers, famous people, leaders, or people in public view a lot have this sort of aspect, because the sun is where we shine, where we're seen, or where our vitality and energy goes. The sun is like our essential being, and the ascendant is in public view and how we project ourselves into the world. The sun can also rule royalty. So, you know, like the king or queen, like Leo. Also pride, self-esteem, recognition, you know, performers, authoritative figures, as well as the characteristics of having courage and dignity, honour, charisma, and, you know, loyalty. So this archetype, as well as the archetype of Cancer, sort of combining, it gives a lot of information about how he sort of comes across and what his sort of essential nature is like. The sun is also the conscious mind, where the moon is the unconscious. If you combine these together, it's sort of also a teaching about how the unconscious and the conscious mind work together in our lives and in society as well. Learning to become sort of more aware of the unconscious mind and live more in the conscious being, with meditation, with being attentive, and also routine and hard work sort of comes into it with the Virgo moon as well. So it's also got the sun trining Jupiter. This is a great aspect for being very optimistic and philosophical, having that sort of outlook onto the world. So he can be objective and he can see the bigger picture. Contrasting that with the Virgo moon, which is all about the details and being analytical, then there's a good balance for sort of understanding both. So Sun in the first is, Sun is your destiny combined with the first house of your identity. He's sort of discovering how he relates to his family and the collective, and also the South Node in the first means he can use his wisdom to help other people. The opposite of the first house is the seventh, so obviously that the seventh house representing the other people. Just basically understanding who he is before he can move into this North Node in the seventh house, or relating that to other people. So we've got Pluto conjunct the South Node here, and Pluto can sort of represent transformation as well as uncovering things about ourselves. It can sometimes be a rough road, one example of Pluto is to sort of let go and realising that non-attachment is at the core of contentment. And obviously non-attachment is one of the fundamental teachings of Buddhism. So the Dalai Lama obviously went through a lot to get to where he is today. And Pluto's all about sort of going through a lot of trials and tribulations and lessons in the past, which is where his South Node is, to be able to teach and learn and overcome these things. So he's got a lovely Venus in Leo, which is lovely. So it's like the lion, they kind of act like people and their friends and family are like their cubs to look after. They're very protective. At its best, it's very warm and open-hearted and loving and generous. So in the third house, this is, how he communicates and how he relates to people. And Venus is the planet of love and affection, and it can also indicate maybe a pleasant voice, because the third house can also represent how we speak. This can also give him a bit of charisma. Leo's very charming. And can also indicate maybe he can really handle being in the spotlight. Leo is very, very good at being centre stage, so he can handle that. This is a very important aspect that I found in his chart as well, which is a Moon-Neptune conjunction opposite Saturn in Pisces in the 9th. So the 9th house is all about beliefs, your world views, religion, faith, and obviously the Dalai Lama. This is central to his life and very important to him. He has a way of sort of connecting and wanting harmony among all religious beliefs. So with Saturn there, it kind of means he understands the value in having sort of a structured faith and belief and routine. And in Pisces, it's very spiritual and compassionate, and also understands that there needs to be a balance of that as well, and to have acceptance and compassion for all kinds of people across all faiths, and that sort of inclusivity. Pisces is really all about learning that we're all sort of connected and we're all the same energy, and any harm done to another is really harm done to ourselves. So the fact that this is opposite his moon, Neptune, is very interesting. That Saturn, it really reflects his sort of attitudes and beliefs back to himself. Neptune can also be maybe illusion or disillusionment and idealism. So Saturn is all about reality and facts. So it shows to me this sort of balance, because it's an opposition. You need to find a balance, a middle ground between these two things. Not getting too carried away with the sort of spiritual, ethereal, unattainable sort of Neptunian side of things, and not to become too stern or dictatorial almost with Saturn with his teachings. Also his moon in Virgo, it can be very self-critical and maybe of his beliefs as well, conjunct Neptune there. So I think this will also prompt him to sort of work out the best way to express the happy medium of this. So Saturn trining his Sun as well is a good indication of a very strong character, self-confidence, and is very responsible with his self-expression in his teachings as well. He takes it seriously. So Neptune's quite strong in his chart, as well as Jupiter, which I'll talk about a bit later. But Neptune, it's also understandable being the planet of meditation and spirituality, boundlessness and oneness. Also the unconscious mind. And he's also got Mars and Libra down there in the 4th house. So Mars is the planet of energy and drive and ambition, where we put our energy. So he puts this into being. All things Libra, very diplomatic, pleasant, charming, negotiating, sort of reasoning. And he wants to sort of discuss things and work out social issues and how to make it work so we can all get along better. Libra's all about sort of cooperation. So now we'll move on to Jupiter, which is a very important planet in his chart. Jupiter's all about our faith and our belief, very similar to Neptune in some ways, but it's more philosophical. It's more sort of about our moral code and ethics as well. So his Jupiter's in Scorpio, which sort of strives to find the hidden meaning behind things. Scorpio is very analytical and very good at pattern recognition and very investigative. So I can imagine these qualities sort of serve him well, learning and delving deep into sort of the spiritual teachings. So this Jupiter is also making a really nice trine to Saturn and sextiling the moon, Neptune conjunction I was talking about before. And it's actually making a grand trine, so with Sun and his Saturn. So grand trines are very positive, and it's a very easy flowing sort of effortless energy between the planets of the Sun, his identity, Saturn, work, and Jupiter, his beliefs. Scorpio can also be about sort of psychological transmutation and transformation and evolving. So with Jupiter, so through his beliefs. Scorpio is very good at uncovering things, things that are hidden, and bringing them to light. Anything unspoken or unheard of. I think a lot of his teachings are to do with that, understanding the psyche and uncovering sort of what lies beneath the surface to sort of understand ourselves better. So Jupiter trine the Sun is a very lovely aspect. Brings a Sagittarius sort of optimistic, benevolent, philosophical flavour to his personality. So Jupiter is also the planet of good luck and fortune, and maybe in a way his life is kind of blessed being chosen to become a spiritual teacher and then the next Dalai Lama, and it's a big responsibility. So a very strong or well aspect to Jupiter can also mean fame, higher learning and honour as well. It's also about sort of expansion and big ideas. So Mercury, the planet how we communicate and think, it's in Gemini for him, the 12th house there. So Mercury is always really at home here in the sign of Gemini. People with the Gemini Mercury can articulate themselves very well, are really good with sort of rhymes and riddles and words. So he can even come across as quite poetic with the metaphors and the way that he speaks. So it's in the house of Neptune, which also makes sense. It's the house of spirituality and the collective. It just sort of highlights the passion and ease for the things that he speaks about and who the message is for, the 12th house being the collective. So this Mercury is also squaring his MC in Pisces, the MC being his career and vocation, and also a public image of himself as well. So ruled by Neptune, again this highlights all of the Neptunian traits I talked about before. So with the square, the Mercury squaring the MC, a square can kind of be a bit of an aspect within ourselves where there's trouble or tension within us, and with Mercury it can be about communicating. If we work on the square aspect within ourselves, we can almost master that part of ourselves. I think the Dalai Lama would have really had to be very conscious of how he comes across when he's public speaking or in the public eye with that square there, and be very conscious of how he's communicating to people, even when he's been doing it for such a long time, and it probably comes across quite natural to him now. I don't think it would have been the case earlier on. He's also had, you know, years of training the mind and meditation, so, you know, which also is, the mind is also ruled by Mercury. So with the square, I mean, this could be a number of things as well. It could even be a language or accent sort of barrier, you know, Mercury being how we talk. So, you know, a bit of a hurdle to get over, but, you know, he's having to learn English and other languages as well so he can reach a broader audience, which is the MC. It can also mean using his mind and his intellectual side for his career. Also a sort of need to be very intellectually stimulated and communicative with others. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like or comment, and I'll see you soon.